Welcome back to Practical Parenting, the podcast that helps empower parents in the trenches find joy in the process and thrive through it all. I'm Krystina Wales, here with my co-host, Dr. Nguyen, Chair of Pediatrics at GBMC Healthcare. So we've been working through Dr. Nguyen's trifecta of health. We've touched on sleep and movement. And now the last topic today is nutrition. And I have to be honest, at first I thought this might be like a light episode with just some simple tips on how to balance our plates, you know, all the fun, colorful things. But as I dove more deeply into the material, this topic is chock full of good information and things we as parents need to keep in mind. Especially for us moms, as women, you know, we carry a lot of stuff from our past into these interactions with our kids about food. So let's get started because we have a lot to go through. So similar to the last episode on sleep, we'll talk about it in stages. So the first one being that stage one, that kind of like baby stage, starting solids, things like that. What are some tips that parents should keep in mind?
Okay, there's nothing difficult about it. I think some parents make a bigger deal about it than they need to, because there's so much reading material now, and there's so much info, and it's info overwhelm for me even. So let's just go back to basics. You want to introduce solid foods to your babies at about 6 months of age. You don't need to, introduce it any earlier because they are getting plenty of calories and nutrition from breast milk or formula. And that really is the central part of their nutrition in the first year of life is breast milk or formula. So food is extras, but it's important because we need to use our mouths. And then, we need to eat our food and not just drink our food. So around 6 months, you can start solids. And I always start with liquidy food that's like so pureed it's liquid almost, and then you thicken the consistency to a thicker, like almost
like mashed bananas,
and avocados. A thinner version of those,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go to the chunky stuff, right? Which it would be like mashed bananas, mashed avocados, mashed potatoes, and my little thing is, please, so you're going to start with cereal because there's a lot of minerals and vitamins and micronutrients in it, and it's a great source of iron, by the way, okay? And then I would start with vegetables. Who of our smart children are going to eat a fruit, which is sweet, and then go back to eating a vegetable? But I remember when I first started practice, we were told to give kids fruits first. And somewhere along the line, I'm like, so whose dingy idea was this? Kids are really smart, okay? No, they're not going to go back to eating non-sweet foods after they've had banana, which is the sweetest of the fruits that you can introduce to your toddlers,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So start with veggies and then go to fruits. And really, so you don't have to mind drama about the consistency of the food also, because parents are always worried about choking hazards. I am too, but it's really easy. Put the food between your thumb and your forefinger, and if you can mush it, your kids can gum it with their gums without teeth. And remember, your front incisors, your front teeth are the ones that come in first, and those only cut pieces of food. It doesn't grind. They don't grind the food. You need molars, which our toddlers are not going to get until they're 15 to 18 months. So It is important to mush the food in between your thumb and forefinger. And if you can mush it, then your baby or your young toddler can also mush it with their gums. And are there any food sizes that I want us to avoid? Yes, absolutely. Anything that has a diameter of a grape or a hot dog, I wouldn't give it. Or if you were going to give it, you have to take the skin off and you have to cut it into quarters. And that's too much work for me. But I do remember my grandmother peeling the skin off the grapes for my baby brother.
Wow.
And cutting it into quarters.
That's love.
Yeah, it is. Definitely a very special, that doesn't happen anymore, I don't think. So the basics, start eating at around 6 months of age, go from a very liquidy, almost watery, and then we thicken the puree to a chunky, something that as long as you can mush it between your thumb and your forefinger. Start with cereal because it's really fortified with vitamins and minerals and iron, which is key. And then start with vegetables and then go to fruits, okay? And then you can do meats and fish, okay? And the absolute no's are nothing the size of a hot dog or grapes. And if you do those, you're going to have to do like my grandmother, peel back the skin, cut it into quarters. Now, are there any absolute no's? Yeah, I'm going to tell you Dr. Terry's no, but first and foremost, please, no honey under a year of age because honey can have botulinum toxin in it. And what happens when your child gets botulinum toxin is it's botulism. You stop breathing. So please, 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 no honey under a year of age. So that's an absolute, okay? And the Dr. Terry absolute no, if my parents, patients of my parents are listening, no juice. There is no need to drink juice, okay? Give your child the fruit because fruit juice is what I've taken out all the sugar from 2 to 3 different fruits and put it into a cup. And so now you're getting the sugar, but you're not getting the fiber and the other micronutrients and vitamins that come with fruits. So, and I don't care if it's organic juice either. It's still juice, okay? And then just a few safety tips. No eating while you're moving, walking, running. And the lollipops. How many times have I seen children in my office coming in with lollipops in their mouths while they're walking? It's a huge choking hazard, parents. If your child accidentally falls, and they almost always accidentally fall during the day, the toddlers and the preschoolers, they're jabbing that lollipop with that stick on the end, right back to the back of their throat, which will cause a lot of bleeding, and it will be guaranteed surgery to fix that. Ugh. Okay, so please, no lollipops while you're walking. And, while you're walking, if you're eating, you just increase your chances of choking. In the event that you think your child is choking, if they're small enough and you can put them in one hand and then just, pound their back, that's the way to do it. Please never do a blind sweep in their mouth because you may inadvertently push something that's in their mouth, food, back instead of actually clearing it out, okay? So patting their back is really key, turning them over and patting. That's it. So that's starting foods.
Yeah.
Other questions from it?
I think that was pretty self-explanatory. I was thinking to myself as you were talking in terms of like quantity. I know I've heard the phrase food before 1 is just for fun. So, if they don't get, if you think it's too much, it's probably fine. And we're just, like you said, we're just learning the textures, learning to try different things. And the breast milk and formula is sufficient until that point. Absolutely. And then in terms of introducing foods, as we move into more of the toddler and early school age kids, we see a lot of picky eating around this point. I feel like I hear other parents say, and mine were the same way, they would eat anything when they were babies, and now we're all particular. But I'm sure it's to your point, once you start introducing different foods, then they develop likes, and they would prefer, like you said, the fruit to the vegetables or something like that. So how might we combat some of the picky eating tendencies?
Well, first, I think that children aren't born as picky eaters. I think it's peer pressure. So most of my toddlers are they're willing to eat anything and try anything. There are some foods that they'll be drawn to versus others that they're not. And I'm leaving out the kids with sensory processing disorder, such as the children who have ADHD or autism. But most kids, okay, they'll eat anything you put in front of them. And if they're hungry, they're going to eat. And if they full, they'll stop. I mean, like their body is really magical. Like it knows when it's hungry. Sometimes it forgets because they're playing, but otherwise, and they have good signals about full and not full. So if we could all be in that childlike state of like before being exposed to our peer groups, that's the key. And so as soon as your child is eating, introduce foods that you eat at the table that you would eat, okay? Please don't try to serve foods that you wouldn't eat either because your toddler is going to catch on and go, how come I'm eating Brussels sprouts and you're not? Right?
I've heard that too when you're introducing foods like to babies too. It's like, don't worry about seasoning it. Like they can have some, like don't over salt it obviously.
Right,
but
right.
If you don't give them just bland food because then they probably won't like it. If it's just plain chicken, put some,
you're
some
spot
seasoning
on
it.
Would you like to eat overcooked broccoli that's been killed and there's no salt in it? No. Why would your child do that either? So I actually do recommend that you season it a little bit, a little bit of salt or what ever spices that you use, okay? Because you want to have a whole sensory experience. You want to have the smell and the taste, and they kind of go together. And the more colorful your plate is, the better. So, vegetables, as many colored vegetables as you can on a plate. But how do you introduce new foods to your child? Focus on one new food at a time. Don't overwhelm them. And today is new vegetable day. Like, okay, that's not going to go over well, right? So always put something on the plate that you know your child will eat. And then if you're trying to introduce a new food, then you put one new food on the plate, okay? And you have two other items that you know are go-tos that they eat. And this even goes back to, when you first are introducing foods. You want to stay on the same food for 3 to 4 days, and then you add on another food, okay? So that doesn't change as you're introducing more foods in toddlerhood and preschool. And then and try, and, if they don't like it, it doesn't mean it's an absolute no. It's an absolute no for today, okay? You wait a little bit, a few days or a week, and then you reintroduce it. But always try to introduce new foods with something that they really like, because then the association is, oh, I get carrots with my chicken nuggets, okay? So
we have this phrase in marketing that you have to see something 7 times before you somebody purchases it. I feel like that's the same with you have to introduce it 7 times before they'll say, all right, fine, I guess I'll eat it.
Yeah, and
this is not going away.
Yeah, I remember something like there is a number. There's like a happy number that they have to try it multiple times before they'll like it. And if you don't make a fuss out of eating vegetables, there won't be a fuss about eating vegetables. Everybody has the same thing on their plates. Everybody's eating the vegetables, right? But I don't know, like something happens, they go to school, some of their friends don't like this, don't like that, and then the kids who had always been great eaters come home and the parents tell me, oh, Johnny's not eating green beans now. He used to love them. I'm like, oh, all right, so you don't do green beans. Here's the other thing I was just thinking of. We want variety in our foods. We don't want to eat the same meal every night. Okay, here's the thing. Toddlers and preschoolers, sometimes they eat the same food day after day, and they're perfectly happy and content. So really, don't impose your food views on them. And they kind of go in stages for everything, I notice. Everything's like 3 to 6 month stage. Like, love this food. And then 6 months later, have nothing to do with it. And I know we want to offer variety, but you know what? Broccoli's broccoli, and if that's the only thing you're eating right now, I'll serve you broccoli every night. I did do that for my oldest, actually. We always had broccoli for him because that was his go-to vegetable, okay? So variety is nice, but, if you can't get to it. And then when I'm coaching parents and children in the office, I say, so is there one vegetable that you like? I said, I only need one vegetable. And you can eat that every night if you want to. And the parents are like, ah. And I say, no, it's okay. So do that, and don't kids really like routine, and they also like routine in what they eat, which we think as adults might be boring. But for some children, it's like, oh, this is what I ate for breakfast, this is what I ate for lunch, and this is what I ate for dinner. It's part of their daily routine, and it makes them happy. As long as it's healthy, we're golden, right?
And I would say the same thing, too, in the inverse is, like, don't hype up dessert. Don't make that like a reward or like a big thing. It's like, oh, we're that it's a regular part of the meal, and that sort of destigmatizes it also.
Absolutely. And don't you recall when we were growing up that, at least when I was growing up, desserts were not a part of everyday meals. What's this thing where everybody thinks after every meal you get a dessert? Like, wow. So this brings up a topic for me about just what are my principles of healthy eating? Really easy. You don't have to do the Mediterranean, the, paleo. There's so many different diets out there, right? Yes, if you read a medical book, it will say the Mediterranean and the DASH diet and the DASH is the low salt diet for folks who have hypertension. that's the ideal. Those are the two ideal diets. But let's really break it down. What's in the Mediterranean diet? Mostly vegetables and fruits, okay? Plant-based oils, olive oil, okay? Low-fat meat or poultry or fish. And, whole grains for pasta and breads, okay? And you are allowed something sweet. At the top of that pyramid, the Mediterranean diet is chocolate. Yeah, dark chocolate. So my philosophy is for healthy eating. Eat mostly things that grow from the ground, so plant-based fruits and vegetables. Do not cook it to the point where you don't recognize what that food is. So, if you're sloshing it in butter, cream, or sugar and frosting, it probably is going to negate some of the, good nutrients, nutritious content of that vegetable or fruit. And then, what are my guidelines? 1 plate full of vegetables a day. Now, you can eat that between lunch and dinner, or most people don't always have vegetables with their lunch. Then I say, then you're going to do a plate full of vegetable with dinner, but you don't have to serve it that way. Mm-hmm. So, the traditional plate had half of the plate as, I want to say, starch, and then a quarter of the plate was vegetables, and a quarter of the plate was protein. No, we want to switch that, actually. Half the plate should be vegetables, and then a quarter protein and a quarter starch, okay?
Yeah.
And then is there anything magical? Fruits. Eat whole fruits. Fruit snacks, and I don't mean any harm, Welch's, but Welch's fruit snacks are not fruits. But how many times have my own patients come to me and say, I eat fruits, I eat Welch's. I'm like, Welch's what? Uh-huh. So please, if your great-grandmother would not recognize it as a food, it's probably a processed or ultra-processed food.
I like that test.
Yeah, so that's really good. And I don't want us to abstain from treats, because anything that you hold, like you can't have this, you can't have that, that's all that we all want to eat, right? So 1 treat a day. It's just like 1 treat or 1 dessert a day. You pick whatever it is, that piece of cake, that, cookie, that ice cream, once a day. Once you've had it, then you're done. And so if you pick it in the afternoon after you get home from school, then you're done. Or if you want to wait until after dinner, then you have that. But we can't have cookies at lunchtime in their lunchbox, and then have cookies after school, and then have ice cream for dessert. That's crazy. That's a lot of sugar. Mm-hmm. And do you know how much sugar we're actually allowed a day?
It's not a lot.
No. It's 1 teaspoon worth of sugar. And depending on who you're quoting, it's like 20 to 25 grams of sugar a day. And do you know how much sugar is in a cup of fruit juice?
I don't want to know.
Okay. It's anywhere between 50 to 75 grams of sugar.
It's a lot.
And the soda, so they have the 16-ounce sodas now. Mm-hmm. So what they're actually putting on the label is for a 12-ounce serving. So, if you drink the whole 16-ounce serving, mm-hmm. it's actually more sugar than what they quoted for the 12-ounce. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of deception out there in marketing.
Yeah. And getting back to the picky eating, too, I've heard suggested that involving kids in the prep, whether you go apple picking and you see how the food grows and you learn the whole process and they get to pick and take it home and, cook something. I know that's been really helpful in RLs too, is everybody cooking together, and then they're sort of learning to cook, but also, involving them in the prep makes them feel some ownership over the process, so they feel proud to eat it afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. So even so, they can, if you want to do a little garden in the summer, mm-hmm. really simple stuff, like tomatoes and cucumbers or lettuces, great. Because then they actually learn this is what it means to eat whole foods from the ground. It really did grow out of the dirt, and mm-hmm. I helped grow it. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of pride in eating something that you helped, bring to fruition. And then grocery shopping. Involve mm-hmm. your kids in grocery shopping. I think it's a skill that a lot of our young people have lost nowadays because their lives are so packed full of other things. I remember going grocery shopping with my mother every Saturday when I was little. It wasn't fun necessarily for me, but now as an adult, I'm so grateful because I know how to pick good fruits, fruits that aren't going to die in a day, right? Fresh vegetables. But when the kids are doing it, you can ask them, so what do you want to put in this dish? What do you want to make? So again, using their senses to feel the food, see the food, right? And then going home and cooking it together. So let them have some determination on what kinds of foods that you're all eating, from a healthy standpoint, but also in preparing it, right? Because who doesn't want to eat something that I have prepared? Like the young, the little kid in you. So there's a lot of pride in it, and you want to stay positive. Okay, there is no reason to have food fights at the table. Okay,
not literal where you're throwing food, but also not arguments about food.
Right. So, it should be a positive, joyful experience. You're coming together as a family, and I'm a huge proponent of family meals. It's good to eat together so you kind of catch up from the day. You're also going to be free from any kind of electronic media because you're going to have to talk. And while you're talking and interacting with each other, you are going to process your food slower. And there's like up to a 20-minute delay between your gut and your brain. So oftentimes, many of us are full way before our brain gets that signal, and we've overeaten. Okay. And honestly, the ideal is to eat to about an 80% of fullness. And now, what the heck is that? I don't know. Okay. So, but if you eat slower, right, and you really allow for that half hour of family meal, guess what? You'll know when you're full or starting to get full. But if you're eating by yourself in front of a TV, you can engulf a whole meal in less than 10 minutes and still feel hungry. But it's not that you're really hungry. I mean, the wiring hasn't talked to each other yet. So family meals are so important, in the connection, the family part, and to help you really recognize your hunger and fullness cues.
And this also leads into another point I wanted to make sure we touched on. But one of my friends was a picky eater as an adult. She did not like a lot of variety in her foods. And so when she had kids, she didn't want them to experience the same thing. And so they, as a family, we talk a lot about modeling here. As a family, they would go to the grocery store and she would say, pick out one new vegetable that we haven't tried or one new fruit, they would all try it together.
Oh, cool.
So I think that's a way to sort of take your maybe, history with food from your childhood or, things that you might have struggled with in terms of whether it's your weight or how you dealt with, eating or how it was dealt with in your house and sort of, manage it together with your kids and work through it rather than, because I think, we don't want to bring that energy to how we interact with our kids. I know us as moms especially are really sensitive to that. So that's one way to sort of engage with it as a family.
Absolutely. And make it fun. It's like so we can do a tasting. I love these things where, it's kind of fun. So if you're doing that with your child, everybody picks a different food. And, maybe one person is responsible for putting it out and people can guess what it is. Make it fun, make it a positive experience, make it something that you're excited about rather than really anxious about trying it, right? Because it's the same emotion. Excitement and worry feel the same in your body, but it's which choice are you going to choose for your brain? And so instead of fear of new foods, how about excitement that it could be better than you could have ever thought, right?
Yeah.
Stay in the positive, stay calm, and carry on.
And, we can do all these great and positive things for our kids, and they can still have their own, emotions and feelings around eating. And society is not kind, especially to young girls with appearance. And so let's talk a little bit about disordered eating, maybe what it looks like, how you might help to manage your young adult with those.
Yeah. So sensory processing disorders is really that can contribute to disordered eating. And what is that? It's the children, again, I've said it before, children who have psychological inflexibility because maybe underlying they have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or they have autism spectrum disorder. And what happens in those situations with children with those diagnoses is that their neurocognitive development is faulty. The wiring is faulty, okay? So they're either oversensitive to certain foods and textures and smells, or they just have a negative association with certain things, okay? So they're misreading the cues. Like something that should be kind of pleasant tasting is like, it's really it's just unimaginable. I'm thinking even of my child who, like the smell of fish, I think really does make her sick. We've walked through an open fish market overseas, and she looked green, okay? And I'm like, oh, I mean, yes, it smelled fishy, but I was so excited about it.
It's affecting her on a different level.
Yeah, but like she really was kind of greenish. And then she watched us eat some raw specimens of fish, of seafood, and I think she was gonna die, She was young, and I'm like, and then now I'm appreciating it more because she does have some sensory issues, meaning like tags on clothes bother her. Mm-hmm. So then you can imagine if anything that's touching your skin is bothering you, the taste of certain things in your mouth and different textures and different tastes are going to be interpreted. It's just going to be off cue, in your body, right? And that affects your eating. So that's how some of these children who have ADHD or autism, they're going to have very limited food because they're kind of scared to try outside of the box because who knows what it'll be like. There could be a really terrible negative reaction to it. Commonly, kids who have like preferences on textures, crunchy is the texture. So here's the little gem. If you know that your kid likes crunchy, okay, they don't have to eat potato chips and Cheez-Its all the time. Carrots are crunchy, cucumbers are crunchy, celery is crunchy. You can roast kale and it tastes like potato chips, except it's kale, 425 in the oven. A little olive oil, a little salt, 10 minutes in the oven, 425 to 450, and you're eating kale chips.
One thing I want to mention along those lines, and then I want to get back to the disordered eating topic, but I heard this recently, and it really reframed food for me. If you think about introducing kids to things like fruits and vegetables, like one box of blueberries can taste very different from another box of blueberries. And sometimes that differentiation, even though it's the same food, if they taste one blueberry and they don't like it, that doesn't mean they won't like another one. But the inconsistency makes them not want to eat it because it doesn't taste the same, so they're not sure what they're going to get. Whereas a cracker is a cracker. It's not going to taste any different, if it's one box or another box. And so when you're introducing foods to your kids, keep that in mind because it really helped me say like, okay, well, it's not that, maybe this, and then I tried a blueberry. Okay, that one is a little bit more tart than, we normally get. So thinking about it that way, I think really helped me.
That's an excellent. I love it. Because you're experiencing what your child is experiencing. They're like, wait, last time blueberries were really sweet. And and then you get a box of blueberries that are kind of really tart, right? So getting back to disordered eating. So disordered eating is not just girls now. I mean, since COVID, I've had a lot of prepubertal and pubertal boys who also have disordered eating. So what are the features? They're very limited in what they'll eat. And they have beliefs about certain foods, how it's good or bad for you. And then there's like limitation of eating, right? There's weight loss. There's mood and behavioral changes from it as well. So we don't really know what causes disordered eating. I mean, there's probably a genetic predisposition, and then there's your environment, right? I mean, that explains most of our diseases, right? So you want to always normalize the eating. But if you start seeing that, your child is getting focused on just certain foods, not limiting themselves to the quantity as well as quantity and types of food, be on the alert, okay? And then if you notice that there's weight loss going on, go see your doctor, right? But modeling is really key. And that's something that I think sometimes we forget. I'm a middle-aged woman. I am putting on weight, and I talk about it inadvertently, and I shouldn't, because I have a young adult daughter whose body is just fine, but she's hearing me talk about, like, okay, I'm not going to eat dessert. I'm not going to eat X, Y, or Z. But I can figure out, like, what it is, but to a younger mind, it's like, wow, there's a lot of negative associations with different foods. And, I don't want to be fat, that. So, be cautious about what you're saying and expressing to your children about food, how you look, okay? Because they absorb it through osmosis, honestly, right? It's modeling, unconscious modeling. So that's why if I find that a child is a bit overweight or even obese, I tell the parents, I show them the growth curve. I'm like, this is where your child is. This is where, the average is for kids your child's age. So, but I'm not going to make a big deal about this. I'm just going to go back to my trifecta of health and say, make sure there's movement every day, and make sure that don't limit what they, not like you have to eat this, you can't eat that. This is all about control. That's what disordered eating probably all shares in common, is that there's always somebody managing and controlling all the things that I do. So at the very least with food, I can control what gets put in my mouth. Mm-hmm. It's not as simple as this, but I think that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. So that goes back to like when we first introduced foods, right? Mm-hmm. Is like, let's not make a war over food.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Make it a joyful experience, make it a positive experience, a family experience, but not like you have to eat this and you can't eat that. The more constrictions and restrictions you put on your children and their food, the more they're actually going to fight back with, I'm going to show you who's in control. I'm in control of what I'm going to eat or not eat, right? And it just spirals from there.
Actually, I'd like to touch on this really briefly, if you don't mind. I've heard some chatter about specifically at pediatricians' offices about parents not wanting the pediatrician to talk about weight in front of their kids. So, I guess where do you stand on that? And if parents don't want that, is there a way that you would prefer they talk to you about that so then you can have a private conversation later? Or maybe you think it's important for the kid to be in the room. I'll let you share your thoughts.
I think that's a great topic because it really is true. I'm having more and more parents who have children with weight issues tell me directly, like email me or tell me before I come in the room with the child that they don't want to talk about the eating. And I said, I won't talk about the weight and the eating. What I talk about is making healthy choices for your eating. And what is that? The same stuff that I've gone through, mostly plant-based, have one treat a day, very general terms, okay? And I really do not focus the kids on their weight measurements, though, okay? Because I think that can really be detrimental because that means that they're going to want to weigh themselves every day. I mean, what's the purpose of that, right? And then I focus on healthy eating and I focus on movement. That and sleep, right? So focus on things that they might be able to do instead of what they can't do, right? It's like, don't do this, you can't do that. That does not encourage or motivate people to build good habits. What encourages people is encouragement, right? And positive phrasing of what it is that you'd like them to do. So let's go move. Don't say exercise, And sometimes people eat because they're emotionally distressed or they're bored. So, for the kids who are bored enough to just, eat away their emotions or eat out of boredom, they're going to need a couple more activities, okay? But the kids who don't even have time to eat, well, they might need a decreased number of activities. So it's a balance, but I really don't focus on numbers with kids. And how I approach it is I'm like, well, your weight is at the 90th percentile, but your height is at the 60th percentile. So there's a mismatch, okay, between your physical frame and where your weight is. And, you're going to grow into a comfortable body. But then the goal is eat healthy and move. I don't say this is, I'd like you to focus on getting to this weight. Because honestly, if there's an overweight child, I tell the parents, listen, if if Johnny, and I'm sorry I keep using Johnny, if Johnny just doesn't gain weight or gains very little in the next year, he's going to gain in height and it will equal out. Okay. So I never want kids to lose weight, even if they're overweight per se. Okay. You have to slow down that progression of the weight going straight up. You'd like it to plateau now that, you're in disproportion with your height. And then with height growth, you will balance out. But it's really hard for some families and kids because I think there is something genetically predisposed, right? Some people can eat and never show it on their bodies. And then other people who exercise and they still put on that weight. So there's a genetic factor there too. So we want to help people be comfortable with who they are and have healthy lifestyles, and not have to look at the magazines. If anybody's looking at magazines, I'm thinking of like the Vogue, the Cosmo, where everybody is really thin. They're anorexic thin, actually, because that's not real living. That's,
right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's all helpful information. So all three things we've discussed, your trifecta of health, sleep, movement, nutrition, they truly are foundational to our health, adults and kids. They're the building blocks from which we build all other habits and what we need to return to when we feel like things are out of whack. So what I think it's important to remember is, as parents, is that these three are also where we see the most power struggles, because they're places where there is a limit to the amount of control we parents have over, what our kids eat and how they move and how often or how long they sleep. So as a general rule, I just want to leave parents with this because it's helped me so much in my parenting is get on the same team as your kid. As soon as you get engaged in that battle, you're against them and no one wins. So get on the same team with your kid against the problem so you can work together to find a solution. So good luck, and we'll see you in the next one.
Great. Thank you. Stay calm and carry on, and you got this. You've survived it before, and you're going to triumph now.
Agreed.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.